not everyone knows or even has ever tried a VR headset. And so, but the fact that there's 60 million plus people on Earth who own VR devices, it's obviously encouraging.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our Applied Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by TerraLeap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by my guest, Renji Bijoy, who's based in Austin, Texas. He's the founder and CEO at Immersed. Welcome, Renji. Good to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.
So your product, Immersed, is all around empowering folks to immerse themselves in a portable, distraction-free workplace, but it's really around VR or VR offices. And I heard recently you're partnering with Microsoft, Facebook, and HTC to build these VR offices. Help me understand, Renji, when you set out to start Immersed, what was the vision? What was the problem you were trying to solve, and where you see you're headed?
Yeah, so when I first had started Immersed, really just every software development team I've ever been on or led, ultimately, it just wasn't the same as being in person, partly because only half of us was in person. The other half was remote. So we'd have people who were on Skype or whatever software we used back then to collaborate, and people would try to screen share, but everyone who was in the office, so the other half of the team that was in the office, we could we could have all of our screens up, we could whiteboard together. But yeah, I guess 4 years ago when we started this, I was really trying to figure out a way to get the remote people on our team to be together with us. And so, yeah, as I was looking at other products out there, there really wasn't anything that solved that effectively. And so I remember even at that point, I'd never even tried VR. I just knew about it. And so I was thinking, let's just try building something for it. Built a prototype. I pitched it around, I was living in Chicago at the time, pitched around Chicago, and over the course of about a month, I had a list of 3,000 people who wanted to buy this product, but the product didn't exist. And so ultimately it set out to start building it. Yeah, does that sort of answer that question?
It does, and it does. It's like you being an engineer yourself, you saw the desire to need to collaborate with folks all over the place, but doing it in VR just goes to the next level. You create a prototype and people are like, I want to buy it. And you're like, it's not created yet. Now you were actually part of the TechStars 2017, right?
Yeah, in Chicago. Yep.
Okay. And from there, over the last 4 years, it's been developed. You've been working on developing this further and further. Obviously hardware is catching up. It's getting there closer and closer. Where you have really honed in on, I actually watched one of your other interviews, it sounds like, is actually in the enterprise space, focusing on the engineers, the coders, those folks that are in those places to help them work better. Is that still your focus?
Not necessarily. Like in the early days, we definitely had to hyper focus on one particular use case, partly because, number one, our team was a team of engineers who our team was remote. So we're like, all right, let's just try to build a product for ourselves first. And because that I think that was a massive advantage that we had, because a lot of people who are building companies and products, they're having to try to get into the mind of the customer. But for us, we were the customer. And so it's just way easier for us to build a product for ourselves. And we worked in VR together remotely. So, but yeah, in the early days, it was mainly coders whose use case we were trying to optimize for. We didn't really, and what that means is if designers came to our application, they're like, oh, hey, like the color is not perfect. And we're like, well, we're coders, so that doesn't matter to us. Or even gamers would say, oh, this is not running at 120 frames per second. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. We're coders. Like we're just typing on our keyboards and writing code. And so, but I think by the beginning of 2020, when COVID had hit, that's when we just had this massive influx of users. Yeah, I mean, now we're only 30% of our users are software engineers, 9% designers. But then you have everything like teachers who are teaching kids remotely in VR. You have day traders, legal teams, finance teams, just totally random people who are using our product in VR. And ultimately, it's really just anyone who uses a computer for work that you could find using Immersed today.
The concept, your core thesis that you can work better in VR, more distraction free. Why do you say that? Why do you feel that truly VR can be better than just, hey, let me pull up my screen and look at it?
Yeah, because you have everything else around it in the real world, right? The real world is stochastic. It's not completely predictable as far as what's going to interrupt you in your environment. Whereas in the virtual world, we get to control your environment. We create a hyper-focused sort of environment so that, you're just able to really kind of hone in on your work. And on top of that, having multiple screens, I mean, it's already been proven by a ton of studies online you can look up that prove that you're more productive if you just have a couple more screens, right? You don't have to have 100 screens, but even if you have 2 or 3 or 4 extra screens, it really does make you a lot more productive. And so for us, we ultimately spawn 5 screens as long as you pair your headset to your laptop, and you could take that private workstation to your couch or to your porch, or if you go on the road or whatever. If you're living on a boat in the middle of the ocean, it doesn't really matter as long as you have internet connection. And you could spawn 5 screens. You don't have to have 5 physical monitors with you, but instead just have your headset. So all that to say, our users have experienced that. You know, say for example, they have other people working alongside them, even in the office, or they have kids at home or whatever. If you had just Bose headphones and you had like you're honing in on your 1 screen or 2 screens or whatever, it's still very easy to get distracted just by looking around. But if you're in Immersed, you have your headset and you have your AirPods or Bose headphones or whatever, you're just in a whole other world. So
hence the name. It's almost like in the name you focus on it itself, your first principle of being truly focused on your work. Yeah. But then you have collaboration and portability. It sounds like those are the other two main components. Obviously there's still some limitations to the hardware itself. Where do you feel is like the tipping point? Are we at the tipping point now of like we're here now and everyone can be jumping into that, or are you still working towards knowing it's a year or 2 away? Yeah.
So as far as there being an inflection point in the adoption curve, as far as they're just like more people are adopting it than not, that's going to be sort of like an Apple glasses or Facebook glasses triggering event, right? As opposed to today. Yeah. I mean, not everyone knows or even has ever tried a VR headset. And so, but the fact that there's, 60 million plus people on earth who own VR devices, it's obviously encouraging. And I think this past Christmas, the Oculus Quest 2 was one of the hottest tech items for as a Christmas present. And so it was just really cool to kind of see the 5x number of users increase on the Oculus store. Obviously, we, from a revenue standpoint, have benefited from that. But yeah, I mean, we do realize that the iPhone moment for VR hasn't happened yet. However, it's come a very, very long way. A lot of users who used to use Immersed back in 2018, 2019, and some people who tried Immersed but decided not to use it back then because of the lack of pixel density, they now try the Oculus Quest 2 today. And they're like, yeah, there is no screen door effect. Like they can see high resolution screens in VR. And so we've gotten to a point where now the resolution is the issue. The quality of the headset is not the issue. Now it's just a matter of, okay, so how can we go from this current form factor to a pair of glasses on my face so that's not like this block on my head, right? So
yeah, it's the weight. It comes down to the weight. I actually shared it to my brother-in-law. I got one of the HTC Vives, and he was so excited to be able to. He's a realtor and be able to show all the different screens, and he can look at it. Yeah. When he put it on, he was like, just the resolution wasn't there. But now the use case, and I actually usually have a Quest right behind me. A funny story: my mother asked to borrow it, so even my mother's wanting to jump on Quest devices now. The future where you guys are headed next, as far as integrations, you're a cross-platform, right? You're both.
So we are actually partnered with them as of like the last couple of months. We're actually in the process of porting over to a lot of their headsets now.
Got it. So your future is to be cross-platform. That's where you're headed.
Yeah. So we're cross-platform on the computer side, meaning we work on Mac, PC, and Linux. But we're not cross-platform on the headset side yet, partly because we want to stay focused initially on the most commonly used headset, and it was the Oculus Quest. And so because of that, and on top of that, it's just like the user who benefits the most is the user who has a portable headset. People who are using plugged-in wired headsets, they lose the value proposition of being able to leave their desk and like sit on their couch or on their bed or whatever.
Right. One of the big hot topics, of course, is around last year with the pandemic of everyone working remote now. They're not at the office. Will it just go back to, okay, this was nice, but now we're going back to office? I think everyone's landed on it's some sort of hybrid moment.
Hybrid, but yeah.
You were talking to me earlier though about because you're pretty connected with Facebook of building an app and integration there, about how they had a reference to 20% of their employees are focused on Oculus because of the energy and realizing where this is headed. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that because COVID was somewhat of a catalyst to get a lot more people to experiment with VR, because people knew about VR for the past like 5 years plus, but they just didn't really have a reason to dive into it. People were sitting at home during COVID. They're like, all right, is there some sort of way I can spend my time, but also what creative ways can I adopt newer technologies in order to help my work from home situation? And so, I think because of that, it was a nice catalyst for Oculus and pretty much the whole VR world at large. And so, I think that's probably why Mark Zuckerberg had decided to move a fifth of their workforce over to the Oculus side. There are 50,000 employees. That means 10,000 people are working on the Oculus side. So that's a huge investment. I read an article, I think it was yesterday or the day before. They were spending before something like 5 to 7 billion a year on Oculus previously, and now that's been increased to like 50 to 70 billion. It's like it's getting real. That's all I gotta say. It's getting very real.
So you're definitely paying attention to that trend of, okay, if that much investment is going in, obviously the devices will get there. It's just a question of time, and then the adoption will come along with it. And you said they even offered their own employees, they can continue to work remote if they want to. So obviously, probably Facebook employees will be one of the first to be working immersed.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And whether it be like different versions or different applications of Facebook's headset itself, or using Immersed or whatever competitors. Like for us, I think a lot of people today find very key features that only Immersed could service today. Again, specifically around spawning 5 screens on Mac, Linux, or PC, and even just being able to do that without any sort of hiccups or whatever in the technology being able to connect. If you download Immersed, it just works. And so we intend to continue doing that, not just on the Oculus platform, but on HTC's and Microsoft's current headsets and whatever new headsets end up coming out this year, next year, whenever. So all that being said, I think that it's nice that Facebook is a very bullish manufacturer in this space. But what I do want to, make clear is, long term, they're not going to be the only ones, right? Apple, Google, Microsoft, even Lenovo, Samsung, Panasonic, all of them have shown their prototypes of their AR glasses. And so all of these tech giants are pouring billions of dollars into this next generation of computing. So all that to be said, no matter what, this is going to be the next iPhone. It's not a question of if, but definitely when. And a lot of people might think that when is 5 or 10 years away. Honestly, I think it's going to be in 12 to 24 months.
12 to 24 months that we're gonna be seeing that. Well, you're just getting me more excited, Renji. for Immersed, just coming back to that for a second, I appreciate the point you mentioned earlier that it needs to be just easy, and that's the problem often when it comes to technology for adoption. Is if you have to click over here and then go into a bunch of settings and optimize this, go over here, and it just takes forever to start using. It's difficult for non-tech folks, people not like me who don't love technology to get into it. And it sounds like you've really focused on that area.
Yeah. So we decided early on, number one, we're not going to start with PC. In the early days, we were just on Mac, partly because we had other competitors in the space who worked on PC, but mainly because PC was easy to develop for back then. They had very specific open SDKs, whereas Mac, a very closed system. Whereas when we surveyed all these people, it turns out 60% of people used Macs, specifically in the software engineering world at the time. And so because of that, and more kind of the startup scene, right, which is where I was sort of focused initially, people who don't have to go through a bunch of corporate hoops in order to get anything approved to use it. And so for me, it was, all right, so we know what the need is. Now let's work our way back to what technology needs to be built in order to service that problem, as opposed to what most people do and our competitors did back then was, oh, what's the easiest thing to build and the fastest way to build it? And let's just shove it into people's faces and see if they'll adopt it. For me, I don't want to use something having to be invented to be an excuse for not creating it. And so that being said, and sure, there are less friction, or there are ways to do things with less friction, but you do have to discern, how do you sort of make a name for yourself in a unique way? For us, we had competitors at the time when I first started who are 4, even 6 years old. And for us being new in this space, the way that we differentiated was we worked on Mac. And so all the people who were rejected for those 4 to 6 years on the Mac platform, we're like, hey, come to us. We'll iterate with you. We'll build the product for you. And turns out it really made Immersed become a household name in the VR productivity space. And then we released for PC as well. And we started, creating sort of, and we wanted to be differentiated. So that was, hey, we're going to spawn 5 screens for you without you having to plug in extra hardware. In order to trick your computer into thinking it has 5 screens. Instead, we're just going to create some virtual display drivers. And so not an easy task at all, but as long as we're focusing on what does the user actually want, and then we work our way back to technology and build that, I think that gets you to sort of a product that is an order of magnitude better than what the current available options are. So I think that as we, look back to the way that a lot of companies build they're really just copies of each other. And I do realize there are other players in the space who look at us and they're like, what is Immersed doing? We have to do that too in order to stay competitive. And I don't really care that people copy our ideas. I just care that they don't have their own.
I like the way you approach it. You're like, you're fine, you can copy me, fine, good, but you're going to focus on keep innovating. Now, it's a free base, right? That you can just download and use, but it's it's a freemium model. So once you want to get some other features, is that how it works?
Yeah, so we actually automatically enroll everyone into a 2-week free trial without any sort of obligation. Like you don't enter credit card information, whatever. We just like, hey, experience the premium version of our product for 2 weeks. If you don't like it, go to the free version, which still has a value proposition over all of the competitors. You get 1 additional virtual display. Again, we're still the only product today that does that. Whereas if you do decide to actually move to the premium version, or stay on the premium version rather, enter your credit card information or whatever, and want to help support the company and obviously have us grow as well, you do get 5 screens. You get to collaborate with a small group of people. So I think up to 4 people. You get to have a lot of the premium kind of focus mode type environments. But yeah, on the free version, you can still do things like virtual co-working. So you can go to a virtual coffee shop, and you're in a space with a bunch of strangers, just like a real coffee shop, right? You're not collaborating with them. You're just working side by side, so you don't feel alone. And you kind of have some energy around you, but you're kind of just focused on your own personal work. But there are definitely small teams who do want to use Immersed as well, and they'll just pay the $15 per month for that. We do have a Teams tier as well that does enable larger groups to enter into kind of a virtual office. And so that's something that we're really iterating on a lot this year, because we do realize that the much larger revenue will be coming from enterprise and things like that. So all that to be said, we have historically focused on the individual consumer use case, but they have been our biggest champion in the enterprise space. So because these people work at places, and so they're the ones pitching Immersed and pushing it to their manager, getting their manager to swipe a credit card, and now we have their team on board as well. So
I love it. Now, there's a couple of new features that are coming on board. One of them being your phone. You can actually be able to see your phone in a virtual environment. Can you share a bit about that? Yeah.
So users have been telling us that whenever they would work in VR, it would be amazing, but they always had to, whenever their phone went off, they'd have to like lift up their headset and be like, all right, whatever's on my phone, and then put their headset back down. And so for us, we want people just to be able to stay focused, right? We don't want them to have to get distracted from having to kind of go in between the real and virtual world. And so, and it helps it helps our users have a much more smooth experience. So like, all right, well, let's bring the phone into VR. And so, yeah, I mean,
was that a simple thing?
That's ever happened? No. What I will say is, we built it very quickly. It's somewhat of a beta that's come out. We did want to be one of the first ones to do it, partly because we love kind of just pushing the envelope, man. Like, I think that we operate very, very different from Apple, for example. Like, Apple's like, we'll let Samsung and Android devices kind of experiment, while the iPhone will just be, hey, we do all the standard stuff, but we do it very, very well. And so for us, we do. I'm an iPhone user. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm a Mac person. I have AirPods in.
So you want to be first to the punch.
Yeah. I think that for us, that when it comes from a software development or technology innovation sort of standpoint, or just really building a product that people want, we don't want to just build the stuff that's safe, right? We're not at scale right now. We are still searching for a certain level of product market fit. So we're going to have to continually experiment a lot. And so because of that, we just need to kind of work on things that users are requesting. So building phone in VR wasn't easy. It was somewhat risky, and it is still somewhat risky in the fact that people have the arguments like, oh, that can also make me more distracted in VR. And my argument is like, well, then don't turn it on, right? And so like you don't have to have your phone in VR. That's up to you.
a balance, I was going to say, of being, you want people to be focused, but people do want features. So it's like both building the options there, but also so that people have the control, but it's still up to them if they want to be focused or not.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, if you want it, use it. If you don't want it, if you don't want it, don't use it. So like for us, it's more, let's experiment and see what it does. It's better than just sort of making up some sort of conjecture that like, oh, using reason too much, right? It's more, let's just see how fast we can build it and throw it out there. So it wasn't easy to build. I mean, just to be candid, we do have some of the world's strongest engineers working here at Immersed. And so it's not just something that another competitor can just quickly and easily build. I think just to be real, a lot of people who are in the VR productivity space kind of go a very conventional standard route in regards to who's on their team, who's building what. And so for us, it's like, if we're trying to build the future of work where you teleport to the office by putting on a pair of glasses, then you're going to have to find some of the world's best hackers, like just crazy coders. And so when it comes to phone and VR, that is something, it didn't take a long time. It took us maybe, like, the prototype was built in a day. We have some crazy engineers on our team, but we kind of worked out the kinks over the coming 2 weeks. And it was the perfect second wave of traffic to our WeFunder campaign, which, took us from $3 million raised in the first day to, it made us hit about $4.5 million in the next day or two. And then we had a couple of other things that we released that helped us essentially have more and more waves to get to the $8 million mark.
Mm. You're on the way there. You built the momentum. You're constantly innovating. But what you just mentioned a second ago brought me back to our last call when we were talking about, okay, what's the future look like? What's the future that you see, actually, that we're all going to be in a year and 2-3 years from now, about this teleporting to a workplace? Speak to that again. Where are we going to be? Where are we going to be? Yeah.
So I think we're going to be where people are just going to be. I feel like there's so many inefficiencies in life that we just do things because that's just the way it's been done. And I think that there's so many mismatches in regards to alignment of incentives, right? Meaning, so people during COVID have really, really enjoyed working from home because it makes them really sort of have a good rhythm. They're comfortable. They're around their family. They don't have a commute. They can stay focused. But the mismatch now on the flip side of everyone working from home is collaboration plummeted. And so whereas in the office before, it was collaboration was at an all-time high, everyone's together, whiteboarding, coding together, whatever, around the computers, whatever. But the mismatch was, okay, well, now I have to commute to get to the office, and now I have to say goodbye to my family and all those types of things, right? For, if you're a consultant, you're gone the entire week, right? Or, maybe you're gone 10 hours of the day or whatever it is. So all that to say, like, I think that if we can build a world where all of these incentives are aligned, where, mommy and daddy don't have to be gone for the entire week because they're having to be at the client's site, but instead they could just take off their pair of glasses and now they're back home for the day. It's like, it's a much more aligned incentive world where you are building or you use a product or have a workflow that works for the employee, but also works for the employer, because as soon as the employer needs them, put the glasses on, you're there. Take the glasses off, you're not there. And so if that's a world where it doesn't matter where you live and where you work, but ultimately companies have access to global talent and people have access to work at any company around the world that they just love their technology or product or whatever and aren't limited because of where they live. I mean, now you're just moving into a world where there's heightened productivity and heightened alignment between what employees want and what employers want. So yeah, I mean, I think that as we move to a world where people can kind of live wherever they want and work wherever they want, you're no longer going to see people localized around major cities. You're instead going to see it kind of flatten out a little bit in regards to, and even just real estate prices, right? Like living in a city living in New York is not going to be ridiculous, right? Compared to living maybe an hour out from the city, right? And so you're going to see kind of maybe housing prices change a little bit, and leveling the playing field, but also people living just wherever they want. I would love to live in New Zealand in the Shire. I say this all the time. It's just such a chill, breezy, rolling hills, so relaxing. But as soon as I need to, talk with Facebook on their next headset or glasses or whatever, I can put on my Facebook glasses and just teleport to a round table with the Facebook team or whatever it is, right? And so, but again, as soon as I want to be back home, take it off, and now I'm back at the Shire with my family or whatever, right? And so that's the hope that we can build, or the world that we can hopefully build.
I love the future that you paint, Renji. I'm 100% there. Thank you for this time. For those that want to hear more though about the story and the journey he's been on, stick around for part 2. We're going to dig a bit more and hear how this has been forming over the last few years and how he got where he is today. So those that want to, you should though go to immersed.com. That's immersed.com. You got the .com. Congrats on that. I imagine that was a journey as well. And be able to try out this immersed working environment yourself in VR. And so, but stick around for part 2 of our discussion. We'll see you guys on the next episode of UpTech Report. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.